Goblin Slayer, never change. Never change with how you're always questioning when something appears, you're always asking, is it a goblin? That alligator scene was absolutely freaking hilarious because one moment you have just something going in the water, you're like, what's happening here? And he's like, is it a goblin? And then all of a sudden, an alligator pops up and he's like, oh, it's not a goblin. And he starts running. It's hilarious. I cannot get over the fact of how Goblin Slayer is just so one-track mind. Like, the man literally always has goblins on the brain. Like, when he encountered, like, the main head, like, honcho priestess, the archbishop or whatever, a part of the church, it was just truly hilarious. Because when he walks into this giant cathedral, you see this beautiful woman. You know, most people, when they see a character like that, or in real life, whatever, they'll probably comment on how pretty she is, or, how, angelic she is, or just how she has this, presence about her to where you're like, oh my god, like, I could tell you're very strong. He said none of those things. Like, Goblin Slayer was not like a typical MC. He straight up just looked at her. They all walked in, and he's like, where's the goblins? And she's like, oh, welcome to the church. And he's like, where's the goblins? And, he just keeps asking where the goblins are, not showing any sign of respect to her whatsoever, which, like I said, is hilarious, because I love how Goblin Slayer is just one-track mind, and the man literally, he cannot get goblins off his mind. Like, seriously, if I had to say if man had two choices, like options, like if he was to choose a girl of his dreams, or to go and slay goblins, the man would probably choose goblin slaying, because, like, it's very clear about what's on this man's mind all the time. I mean, he legit just did not say anything to the priest, and even respect her at all. And also, did anyone else get, like, a Dark Souls vibe from the priest, like the main head honcho archbishop or whatever? Like, did you see how she had like the blindfold on and she looked very much like a firekeeper? Was I the only one that saw that? Like, seriously, the design of her character is eerily similar to a firekeeper in Dark Souls. If she had a little bit of darker clothing, I would straight up say that's a Dark Souls reference. Like, there's just no way that isn't a Dark Souls reference, but alas, I'll leave it at that. Now, anyways, this episode has quite a bit of action. If you've been waiting for more action in Goblin Slayer, then this is the episode for you, because there is quite a bit of goblin slaying in this episode, and there's quite a few things I do want to talk about when it comes to that. Apparently, there was a scene that has been cut out from the anime. Apparently, White Fox is rearranging events, and basically they've skipped, like, a very important scene, and some of the dialogue that happens throughout this episode doesn't really make much sense for anime only such as myself, which I think I understand where some are coming from. Let's get into that. So basically, there was multiple times throughout this episode to where, like, the priestess or, the elf, they were constantly saying to Goblin Slayer, like, no water, no burning, no poison, nothing like that. Like, basically saying you're not allowed to use these certain types of options, and he's like, but why not? But he's like, okay, I'll go along with it. And them constantly mentioning this over and over throughout the episode, it's a little bit weird because he hasn't really done anything, like, too crazy to warrant them to constantly say this, and apparently the reason why they are saying this so much in this episode is because, like I said earlier on in this video, they skipped something. Now, I don't know exactly what it is. I have no idea. Personally, I don't think it's too crazy at the moment. I'm going to assume that whatever maybe they might have skipped, they're probably going to add it back in. I don't really know. I just wanted to point out the fact that if there was some dialogue that seemed a little bit weird, it's apparently because of that. Personally, I don't think there's going to be a problem. I think White Fox is going to be able to handle this just fine. I mean, it's already been a very good series from the first episode onward, so honestly, I just don't think it's going to be that bad. I think they're going to add it in, and it's going to blow everybody's mind with whatever it possibly is. But okay, dropping that for a second, let's talk about the Demon Lord, which I actually neglected to talk about in my last episode review of Goblin Slayer, and I quickly want to apologize for actually not really talking about it. But we get a little bit of details that there is a Demon Lord in this world. And apparently the Demon Lord is pretty much about to get defeated, and at the start of this episode, you have a bunch of the Demon Lord's minions just completely annihilated by, like, the Chosen One, aka, like, you would normally assume be the MC of a series. Like, if this was a standard series, like a standard story, that woman, the Chosen One, in this episode that defeated all those underlings and stuff of the Demon Lord, you know, normally this would be the main male character, main female character would be following, but that was actually not the case. And I do like how this story of, you know, Goblin Slayer does have something very grand going on behind the scenes, like typically what would be frontline and center for normal readers or watchers of a series, but instead we're seeing this very mundane life of Goblin Slayer that's in this world that does, like I said, have like a Demon King, but he's just wanting to slay goblins, which I think fits the theme of this series very nicely, because one of the big points of what the series is trying to say is that, yes, you're special to be a chosen one, to take down the Demon Lord and all that. Great, good for you. You're able to do something fantastic that everybody's going to be praising you for, which you see constantly throughout the start of this episode, people praising the Chosen One and the people that took down, you know, the Demon Lord's minions and stuff. That was great, and that's the big point of what Goblin Slayer's been trying to say, is that that's cool and all, but sometimes people have to do jobs that don't get praise. People don't get rewarded like, you know, how the Chosen One normally would be. And like I said, Goblin Slayer has a job that, you know, needs to be done, but nobody really cares for or doesn't compliment enough at all. It's like I said, like plumbers or people that, you know, clean up septic tanks or whatever. That's pretty much the entire point of what this series is about, or one of the main messages here. But anyways, getting on to the main point though, basically I do like the aspect that the Demon Lord is in this world and is being handled behind the scenes, but we still decide to focus on Goblin Slayer. That's pretty cool, honestly, because I feel like before everything is said and done, the Demon Lord will probably be defeated, but even if the Demon Lord is defeated, it doesn't mean that goblins are done, because there will always be more goblins. They always will come back. They will multiply very quickly, which was established a couple episodes ago. So I do think that the main message here is even if the main grand enemy is gone, the lesser enemies will always be around, and there will always have to be people that needs to clean them up, which goes along with one of the adventures, what he said in this episode, saying that, you know, if it really, you know, if the Chosen One could handle everything, then adventures wouldn't exist, but the reason why they exist is to take down the lesser demons or monsters or whatever that is still around. Okay, so next thing I really need to get into, I guess let's talk about the situation with the goblins inside of the Water City. Now, obviously, there's quite a bit of goblins that have appeared in this city, and it really starts making you question what's going on here. I mean, number one, these goblins are able to just, you know, get in throughout the city and take as many women and children as they want, and they're not really getting punished for it. And they're just able to navigate like nothing. Now, we gotta remember, a couple episodes back, it was established that goblins do learn very quickly. Like, yes, they're not the most intelligent creatures, like, you know, something maybe a high-level demon or something, but goblins do learn. They adapt. That Goblin Slayer himself said this, and that's the reason why that, you know, the children needed to also be taken down as well, because if they saw what happened, they would learn from that and better themselves and be a lot stronger, which we see elements of this happening throughout this episode. For instance, the goblins started to use boats, which normally they wouldn't use boats, but they can learn how to use them if it is taught to them, and apparently someone had to teach them to use a boat to be able to accomplish some of the feats they did throughout this episode. And then other things too, like they learn how to fight, ambush, and all of that. So it's interesting that these goblins are very well organized, but there is something very shady going on, and Goblin Slayer gives off something very ominous in the episode, basically saying that something is making this very artificial, unnatural amount of goblins, for instance, the way they're multiplying, because remember what he said also in this episode, that he thinks like a goblin. Best to defeat an enemy is to think like them, and he's always thinking like a goblin. And since he's so close to goblins, like he understands how they think, how they work, he can easily detect if something is off, if these goblins are acting very shady, very different, or, you know, if they're multiplying at an insane rate that just does not make sense in the grand scheme of things. It's obvious that something is happening. And we do see some form of creature at the end of the episode, and I really don't know what to say. I don't know if it's a hobgoblin, another ogre, an orc. I really have no idea exactly what it potentially could be, but it's very interesting to see that we're about to have another encounter probably with a very strong foe. Now, I'm willing to bet when he does encounter this, like Goblin Slayer, when he encounters this strong foe, he's probably going to say, is that a goblin? And, obviously he's going to like, no, I guess not. I'm going to assume something like that. But he's probably going to take it down regardless, because you got to remember, if it is affiliated with goblins, most likely he will kill it regardless, because he doesn't want any more goblins in the world. So, point A leads to point B, and he's just going to end it very quickly. But I think that's pretty much about it. It's a interesting episode. I think overall the main point got across to what this episode was trying to do. There was a lot of comedy in this episode. I love the little comedy with the elf and the dwarf once again. Basically, the elf's like, why don't we feed the dwarf to the alligator? Or the situation with how, they were asking, the lizard man. He's like, hey, why don't you talk to the alligator? He's one of your kind. Why don't you talk to him? He's like, sir, I haven't spoken to my relatives since I have left. And, none of my relatives are that aggressive. That was just pretty freaking hilarious. I just love the little banter throughout the episode, and it really gives life to these characters. It's one of the reasons why I love fantasy series so much, and seeing these interactions with different species just working together. But I'll end it at that. I love you guys. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you live. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. If you like this video, please leave a like. And if you want to get notified for whenever I upload a video, please click the bell icon down below. And with that, Chibi out.